Hello, this is Enigma. You are listening to my experience report for 100 milligrams of MDA. Before I start this trip report, I'd like to apologise that there is no video to accompany this dialogue. This is due to my laptop breaking and me now using a small notebook. It's simply not powerful enough for me to insert loads of images into Windows Movie Maker. I'd also like to state that prior to this experience, I had some previous experience with MDA, albeit the last time I used it, the effects were not particularly profound due to me already having binged on MDMA for about 2 days prior. So I really was not prepared for the intensity of this experience, and I will now divulge the details. At around 5:30 p.m. I returned home from a day in town with some weed and a small amount of ketamine. In my room I measured out about 100 milligrams of MDA, which I had earlier received, and I made this into a bomb which I dropped. 30 minutes later I was coming up, and this had a far softer onset than the oftentimes sharp, jittery and overwhelming onset which is characteristic of Molly. And this felt a lot more like coming up on a traditional psychedelic, somewhere in between acid and mushrooms. I got up from my bed to look out of my window upon the sun setting on the fields behind my house. My vision was altered drastically as I perceived extremely vivid tones of orange, red, yellow and purple appear to burn through the fabric of the sky and melt into one another. Tones were greatly enhanced, and my perception of depth was transformed into a metamorphosing field of tribal-esque fractal geometry, which was greatly intensified when I closed my eyes, and consisted of thus pyramids, eyes, and all manner of ancient-looking monoliths and constructs, all appearing to change and merge with one another in a way which was reminiscent of psilocybin. Yet there were also synthetic elements to this trip. As I turned out my bedroom light to lay down and trip out, I took note of some partial similarities to Molly, a trance-like state and some bruxism, though surprisingly little nystagmus. Feelings of peace, interconnectedness and love were present, but were not the dominating features of the experience as per Molly, or as intense, and so it would seem that MDA does indeed produce weaker and pathogenic effects than Molly, though this is not to say that it is completely void of warmth, but rather it is a duller heat. And thus, not being overwhelmed emotionally and prone to distraction as I would on a roll, I was able to simply lie down, let myself relax and be gently led of the spirit through the corridors of my mind, this being a tunnel which was represented visually in stunning closed-eye imagery consisting of morphing fractal architecture formed through a swirling black hole apparently located in the midst of my field of vision. The trip was perhaps most intense at about 3 hours in, and as I was laying on my bed in the dark I felt mellowed and yet overwhelmed at the same time by the impartation of the mechanical psychedelia which washed over me in steady waves, and not in an altogether unpleasant way, though I must say I did find MDA to be an at times less forgiving substance than Molly in terms of being able to control the experience through maintaining a rational thought process. Indeed, I did experience feelings of panic and fear throughout this experience, but thankfully not to the point of being overwhelmed, and I was thankfully able to reconcile all of this anxiety through the same introspective component of this drug, which had initially brought all of this anxiety to the surface to begin with. The peak was, in a word, deep and a profoundly insightful thing. I lay in my bed for many hours with my eyes closed, letting my thoughts carry me along on a journey, which was a calm and blissful excursion, and yet at the same time a consistently an energetic and intense venture. The wind which caught in the sails of my soul and carried me up the river, so to speak, was a strong force to be contended with, and was at times a somewhat dreadful thing, apparently being able to uncover skeletons which had long been hidden away in the closet with frightening ease, and I could in no wise turn my eyes away from these things, but simply had to accept whatever consequences would arise due to their uncovering, and be thankful for the beautiful way in which they were revealed to me through this novel substance. I was also taught lessons of the spirit through visual demonstrations, which sometimes amounted to a sensation of travelling in a way which was not altogether dissimilar from astral projection, yet was distinct in and of itself, and amounted to my field of depth morphing to change the dimensions of my room into new spaces wherein hidden truths were revealed to me. Insulfating ketamine barely touched the sides when sporadically used in the midst of the peak, but did serve to increase my interest somewhat in producing a very pleasant body high, which seemed to take the edge off the sometimes less desirable physical effects of MDA. By midnight, 6 hours after ingesting the drug, the trip was still in full swing, and I was already astonished by the duration of the experience, and by 9 hours in I was ready for sleep. But Sally wouldn't let go of me yet, and so I lay there half asleep for being physically and mentally drained, and still half engrossed by the psychedelic firework display which continued for another few hours before slowly curtailing off about 12 hours after ingestion, after which I spent the whole day in bed drained and still partially tripping. I wish I could recall more from the peak, but amnesia set in early on during the experience and continued throughout, and so I can only recall disjointed fragments of this trip. I must say that I was shocked by the strength of this drug in terms of its psychedelic properties, as I had expected only vague psychedelic effects and an experience which more resembled molly than acid or mushrooms, but it turned out to be quite the opposite of this, and not in a disappointing way either, but in a way which has not only increased my curiosity, but which has instantly earned my respect and simply demands further experimentation and research in the future. I now have 100 milligrams of MDA left and a good mind to acquire some MDMA so that I can use the two in conjunction with each other, as I believe this will produce a very interesting and perhaps unique synergy which might be altogether distinct from either when taken alone. Overall, I was most impressed by the visual qualities of this drug, especially with regards to the closed-eye imagery it produces, than anything else, though its introspective properties are also worthy of praise. This is not a rave or party drug in my opinion, but more suitable for self-exploration in the comfort of one's own home than anywhere else. And though I would like to have taken a venture outside, I sometimes felt unable to coordinate myself and noted a moderate body load which increased throughout the experience. I will summarise by saying this, that Sally is indeed one hell of a ride and not a drug to be taken lightly by any means. I am both interested and also a little frightened to think what a larger dose would do, and may work myself up to this over the course of time. This was Enigma, and you were listening to my 100 milligrams MDA trip report. Always conduct research into whatever chemicals you are using and be well aware of the dangers and risks involved, especially when mixing substances together. There are plenty of informing articles on TripSit and also on the Psychonaut Wiki. Please check these links out before conducting any of your own experimentation. Peace and God bless.